Soviet industrialization during Stalin's era is arguably one of the most successful reforms in the entire history of the Soviet Union. Industrialization in a short span of time managed to transform the predominantly agrarian Soviet Union into an industrial giant. However, even such an achievement by the Soviet Union did not occur during the involvement of Western countries. And in this video we will discuss how Western countries assisted in carrying out industrialization in the Soviet Union and how it influenced further development. To begin with, a few words about industrialization itself are necessary. Industrialization commenced in 1929, after the abandonment of the new economic policy in the Soviet Union. The primary goal of industrialization was to create an industrial base for the Soviet Union to catch up with Western nations. Even Stalin himself declared the country was lagging behind the West by 50 to 100 years. The Soviet government also aimed to develop an independent military industry for future confrontation with capitalist countries. Forced industrialization was achieved through harsh exploitation of rural areas, with all resources flowing from village to cities, and agricultural products being massively exported, leading to merciless exploitation of people, which in turn triggers frequent revolts and uprisings. The results of industrialization were not longer uncommon. Already in the first 5-year plan, industrial production volumes increased manifold. Oil extraction increased by 184%, electricity production by 270%, and an automobile production essentially started from scratch. The subsequent 5-year plans under slogans of accelerated industrialization also showed good results. By the end of the third 5-year plan, which concluded in 1941, the Soviet Union became one of the leading producers of industrial goods in the world, with its armed forces being numerous and sufficiently modern. And moving to the main topic, many achievements of industrialization would have been impossible without the assistance of the Western countries, particularly Americans. Specialists who essentially constructed hundreds of factories on the territory of the Soviet Union were among them. The main problem that arose during the one side of industrialization in the Union was simply the lack of specialists in various fields, making full-fledged industrialization without outside assistance particularly impossible. As for Western specialists, they began to come to the Soviet Union primarily due to financial interest, and secondarily because of the Great Depression that started in 1929, during which there was an economic downturn and enormous unemployment in Western countries. Because of this, American specialists had no objections to coming to the Soviet Union. Additionally, it's worth noting that cooperation with Western countries during the industrialization process not only contributed to the technical development of the Soviet Union, but also has considerable political significance. While the USSR was developing its industry with the help of foreign specialists and technologists, Western countries also saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their relations with the Soviet Union, or to counter the expansion of influence by other states. Furthermore, participation in USSR industrialization projects provided Western companies with opportunities to secure lucrative contracts and expand their businesses beyond their national borders. Perhaps the most famous figure in this endeavor was the American Albert Kahn, who arrived in the Soviet Union as early as 1928, bringing with him only 25 engineers. He stayed in Russia until 1932, during which time he managed to train and prepare thousands of Soviet citizens who later became specialists, capable of independently engaging in industrialization. He designed and organized the construction of 571 factories in various sectors, including tractor plants, smithies, automobile factories, and so forth. Kahn's company became the largest foreign contractor and consultant in the industrial development of the Soviet Union, receiving orders worth $2 billion. An example is the construction of Stalingrad tractor plant by Kahn's company. It's noteworthy that it was initially built in the United States, then dismantled, transported to the Soviet Union, and reassembled there under the supervision of American specialists. Due to the rapid pace of industrialization, American specialists often simply replicated existing factories in America. For instance, the Magnitogorsk Metallurgical Combine was an exact copy of an American plant, and several American firms were involved in its creation. Many large American companies were also interested in entering the Soviet market. For example, Ford Motor Company helped establish automobile and light tractor production in the Soviet Union. The Moscow plant AZLK, which produced the Moskvich car in the 1960s, was built following the model of Ford's American plant. Moreover, together with Ford, an auto assembly plant was opened in Nizhny Novgorod using conveyor production. In addition to the factories themselves, Soviet specialists received a range of production technologies. For example, the Dnieper hydroelectric station, which remains one of the largest hydroelectric power stations in Ukraine, and it was also built thanks to American companies, particularly General Electric. Their equipment was installed at the station, which in its early years was one of the most profitable in the world. Rockefeller firms were even involved, evidently assisting in the construction of enterprises for the oil industry, particularly in Baku. German companies and specialists were also engaged in industrialization projects. During the existence of the Weimar Republic, close ties existed between the Soviet Union and Germany. Germans, due to the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty, were interested in industry beyond Germany. For example, the Siemens company began supplying equipment to Soviet factories. According to the Soviet Union's data, from 1923 to 1930, a dozen companies were involved in heavy industry, with 170 agreements on technical assistance signed, mainly involving German and American companies. Naturally, the Soviet government did not publicize the fact that foreigners were building factories and plants. Therefore, even the branches of companies involved in industrialization had Soviet names. For instance, Albert Kahn's aforementioned company was called Госпроектстрой, and the branch of the German company Demag also had a Soviet name and was called the Central Bureau of Heavy Machinery Engineering. It also worth noting that Soviet workers underwent internships at American factories, particularly at the Ford plant mentioned earlier. This allowed them to acquire skills and moreover take technologies back with them. Ford, besides its patents, shared all the details of the production process and saw nothing wrong with it. Upon returning, the acquired skills were already being applied in the Soviet Union. As we can see, the Soviet government owes much of the rapid industrialization to Western countries. Obviously, without specialists and technologies, conducting industrialization would have been particularly impossible. It was thanks to Western countries that hundreds of factories appeared in the Soviet Union, and the country embarked on a transitional path from agrarian to industrial. Thus, cooperation with Western countries during industrialization not only contributed to the modernization of the Soviet Union's economy, but also had significant political and social consequences, influencing the formation of Soviet state and economic policies.